The year I finally saved up enough to buy my own shop, I was 35 and had grease permanently stained beneath my fingernails. My name is Leo, not Leo the lion, just Leo the mechanic, born and raised in a small corner of Brooklyn where the smell of exhaust fumes and fresh-baked bread were a constant perfume. For the better part of 2 decades, my life had been a series of small, honest transactions, a clunky engine purring back to life, a single dad's grateful sigh when his minivan was ready for the school run. That was my currency, my purpose. But I wanted more than purpose. I wanted a name on a sign. Leo's Auto Repair. It was a dream so vivid I could already smell the new tires and feel the cold steel of the hydraulic lift I'd buy with my own money. I'd worked on cars since I was a teenager, starting with an old Dodge Dart in my dad's garage. I'd learned every nut and bolt, every rattle and hum, and now, finally, I had a nest egg big enough to hatch my own future. The person I shared this dream with more than anyone was Sarah, my wife. We'd been together since high school, a story of young love that had matured into quiet, comfortable routine. I'd come home smelling of oil, and she'd have a simple, good meal waiting. I'd talk about the perfect location I'd found, a disused warehouse on a busy corner, and she'd smile, but her eyes held a faraway look I couldn't quite decipher. I told myself it was just exhaustion from her long hours at the clinic. My best friend and neighbor, Mark, was the other confidant. Mark was the opposite of me. He wasn't a man who got his hands dirty. He was a real estate broker, sharp as a tack, and always dressed in a crisp suit. He had a way of making everything sound easy, like the world was a game of chess he'd already won. When I told him about my plan, he clapped me on the back with a genuine booming laugh. "Leo, my man, this is huge! You've got the talent. All you need is the right spot. Let me help you out. I know the market. I'll get you a great deal." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my best friend, and Sarah distraction and the friendship. But at home, the atmosphere was different. Sarah started talking about her life with a new bitter edge. She'd get a call from her sister and come back into the room sighing, muttering about her sister's new house or her brother-in-law's promotion. "He's just an accountant, Leo," she'd say, "but they're so comfortable. It's so easy for them." The word easy was always followed by a long, pointed silence, a silence that felt heavier than any argument. She started spending more time with Mark's wife, Lisa. They'd go shopping together, and Sarah would come back with new clothes and a faraway look in her eyes. One night I found her on the phone in the kitchen, her voice a low murmur. She hung up as soon as she saw me. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Just Lisa," she said too quickly. "We were talking about a new spa." The unease settled in my gut like a lead weight. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just talking about a spa. It was a subtle shift, a quiet rebellion against the life we had built. My dream of the shop, the very thing I thought would bring us closer, seemed to be pushing her further away. I told myself it was just stress. We were both just stressed. The dream felt so close, yet every day it seemed to slip through my fingers like the fine dust of an engine filter. I didn't see the true threat. I was too busy staring at the horizon to see the daggers being sharpened right behind my back. Explicit came on a Tuesday. I was covered in oil, my hands deep inside the guts of a Ford pickup, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mark. I wiped a rag across my forehead and answered, my voice a little rough. "Hey, Mark, what's up?" His tone was apologetic, a little weary. "Leo, man, I've got some bad news. That place on Elm Street, the warehouse, it's gone. A big corporation just bought the whole block, cash offer. There was no way to compete." My stomach dropped. That warehouse wasn't just a building, it was the building. I had driven by it 100 times, picturing the sign with my name on it. the light that streamed through the grimy windows, the high ceilings perfect for lifts. Expected. It was something colder, a flash of irritation that she quickly masked. "Well, that's a shame," she said, her voice flat. "But you can't just give up. What are you going to do?" "Mark said he has some other places," I said, my shoulder slumping. "They're not as good, but maybe we can make it work." She slammed the cutting board down on the counter. "Maybe? Leo, you can't build a future on maybe. We're not getting any younger. I'm tired of hoping. I'm tired of working and seeing our friends getting ahead while we're stuck in the same place." The words hit me like a physical blow. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, a ghost of a life we weren't living. The dream I had so carefully nurtured suddenly felt like a burden, a millstone around her neck. The easy affection we once had was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile politeness. We ate dinner in silence, the only sound the clinking of our forks on the plates. I tried to talk to her, to connect, but her phone buzzed with a text message and she picked it up, her face lighting up with a brief, private smile. She didn't look at me again for the rest of the night. I went to bed, the image of that empty warehouse and the weight of Sarah's disappointment swirling in my head. I felt like I was losing everything at once. My dream, my wife, my belief that hard work and honesty were all you needed to get ahead. The gap between us felt wider than the Atlantic. I had no idea that Mark's lie and Sarah's silent betrayal were just the beginning, and that the foundation of my life wasn't just crumbling. It was being systematically dismantled. The following Saturday morning, I woke up early, the weight of the previous day still heavy on my shoulders. I couldn't sit still in the quiet house, so I decided to clear my head with a drive. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove, the engine's rhythmic hum a familiar comfort. Without thinking, I found myself on Elm Street, a reflex born from months of driving by the old warehouse, imagining its future as my shop. But as I turned the corner, my blood ran cold. The old brick building was gone. Buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. "I'm going to grab coffee with Lisa. Be back soon." The message was a casual pinprick, but it burst the dam of my building fury. Lisa. And Mark, the perfect, smiling couple who lived right next door. The unease I'd felt with Sarah's distant behavior, her sudden materialism, her private phone calls. It all suddenly took on a sinister new meaning. I couldn't breathe. The air in my car felt thick and toxic. I turned the ignition off, got out of the car, and just stood there, staring at the construction site. My knees felt weak. I must have stood there for 10 minutes, my mind racing through every conversation, every shared laugh, every promise. The foundation of my entire life was a house of cards built on a swamp of lies. As I was about to get back in my car, a voice called out, "Leo, what are you doing here?" It was Mark in a crisp blue polo shirt and khaki shorts, a wide, confident smile on his face. He walked towards me, radiating the smugness of a man who had everything. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, the casualness in his voice a new form of torture. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, my eyes narrowed, my fists clenched at my sides. His smile faltered. "Hey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The ghost of a dream, the ghost of a friendship." The smile was gone completely now. His eyes shifted from mine to the construction site, a flicker of guilt, a flicker of shame, a flicker of something far worse, victory. "Look, Leo, I can explain," he stammered, his usual smooth veneer cracking. "It's just, An opportunity came up. You know how it is. We're in real estate. The right place at the right time. I figured with my business savvy and my what, Mark? My trust? My savings? The long hours I spent dreaming of this place while you were a step ahead of me, pulling the strings? I finally yelled, the words tearing from my throat. You didn't just take a property. You took me on it together. A two-person betrayal, orchestrating my fall while I was still dreaming of my rise. I looked from Sarah's terrified face to Mark's defeated one, and the rage that had been building inside me solidified into something new, something cold and crystalline. It was the calm of a man who has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. I had been foolish, trusting, but now I was a ghost myself, a shadow of the man they knew, and I knew exactly what a ghost does. It haunts. Reverted to the silence was louder than any scream. Sarah's face was a mask of pure terror, and Mark's bravado had completely collapsed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The voice from the minivan, a ghostly echo of her betrayal, hung in the air between us. I looked at Sarah, not with rage, but with a chilling emptiness. The woman I had loved, the girl I had promised my life to, was a stranger. Her wide, pleading eyes, the hands she wrung together, it was a performance I could no longer believe. The betrayal was so complete, so meticulous, that the hurt was no longer a fire. It was a frozen void. How long? I asked, my voice a whisper, devoid of emotion. I wasn't asking about the money or the land. I was asking about us. Sarah started to sob, a choked, theatrical sound. Leo, please. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. Mark said it was an opportunity, that it was for the best, that you would never have made it on your own, and this was the easiest way. My gaze shifted to Mark. He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his expensive shoes, the man who had promised to help me, who had used my trust as a weapon. She's right, man, he muttered, his voice weak. It was just business, nothing personal. Nothing personal? My voice was still a whisper, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. You used my dream. You used my wife. You used my life savings. You're building— Miss. I didn't say another word. I turned on my heel, walked back to my car, and got in. I drove home, my mind a blank slate. When I got to the house, I walked past Sarah as if she were a piece of furniture. I went into the bedroom and started packing a bag. I took my tools, my most comfortable work boots, a few changes of clothes, and my small notebook filled with car repair diagrams. I didn't take any of the things we had bought together, the furniture, the TV, the pictures on the wall. They were all tainted. They belonged to a life that no longer existed. Sarah followed me into the room. Leo, what are you doing? Please, don't leave. We can fix this. I zipped the bag shut and turned to face her. My eyes were cold and I felt nothing. There is no we anymore, Sarah. You made sure of that. I walked to the front door, the key to the house in my hand. I placed it on the small table by the door. You can have the house, I said, my voice flat. You wanted the easy life. Now you have it. I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, the keys to a hollow victory in her hand. The life I had built was gone, but the ashes were all I needed. The betrayal had taught me a lesson far more valuable than any business plan. I had nothing to lose, and in that vacuum of despair, a new plan, a new and far colder purpose began to take shape. This was not a story of forgiveness. It was a story of methodical, surgical revenge. My name was Leo, and the mechanic was about to get to work. I didn't go far. I rented a small room above a diner. a place that smelled of stale coffee and fried onions. The old landlady didn't ask for a deposit, just my word that I'd be quiet and pay on time. It was a no-frills existence, the opposite of the manicured lawn and two-car garage I had left behind. In that tiny room, with a single bare bulb and the hum of a rusty air conditioner, I finally started to think clearly. My fury, that raw, boiling emotion, had cooled into something sharper, a cold steel blade. I had lost everything, but in a strange way, that was a relief. I had no house to worry about, no wife to placate, flashy design, no advertisements, just me writing. My first post was simple. I didn't talk about my betrayal. I talked about a common problem, a rattling sound in a car suspension. I explained what it meant, the dangers of ignoring it, and the difference between a cheap repair and a quality one. I wrote about the parts, the tools, the process, all with a detail that only a true expert could provide. I wrote another post about the importance of genuine brake pads, and another about why you should never trust a shop that gives you a free inspection. My writing was straightforward and no nonsense, just like my work. I was giving away the secrets of my trade, demystifying the black box of auto repair for the average person. I didn't use my real name. I signed off every post with The Honest Wrench. I shared the link on forums and social media groups, not with a plea for attention, but as a genuine offer of help. The blog started to gain a small following. People appreciated the clarity and the honesty. They'd ask questions, and I'd answer them, patiently and in detail. My reputation as The Honest Wrench started to grow, a reputation built on trust and knowledge, the very things Mark had no use for. He had built his business on lies, on the illusion of success. I was going to build mine, slowly and meticulously, on the unshakable truth of good work. I was forging my new life, not with a hammer, but with a keyboard. And the first blow had just been struck. Barrett's Elite Auto grand opening approached. The advertising blitz hit the city like a summer storm. Billboards went up, radio spots blared, and a slick, expensive-looking website promised unparalleled service and luxury auto care. It was all sizzle and no steak. I knew it, but the general public, blinded by the gloss and the promise, didn't. They came in droves, impressed by the chrome-plated lifts and the clean floors, not knowing that the spotless facade was a cover for shoddy workmanship and cheap parts. My blog, The Honest Wrench, was still a quiet corner of the internet, a calm oasis in the digital storm. I hadn't even mentioned Mark's name directly. His own incompetence was doing the job for me. I started to craft my posts in a more targeted, though still completely anonymous way. I'd write a detailed guide titled The Anatomy of a Squeaky Brake Job, explaining the telltale signs of cheap brake pads, the high-pitched whine, the poor stopping power, the telltale signs of a rushed installation. I'd post it and watch as the comments filled with people saying, "This sounds exactly like what's happening to my car." The most satisfying part was watching his public face crumble behind the scenes. Mark, a man who lived and died by his reputation, was oblivious to the digital whispers. He was too busy entertaining local business owners and schmoozing with suppliers to notice the quiet rebellion building online. He still held his head high, the king of his new chrome and steel castle. One day, I was under a car at Frank's garage, working on a simple oil change, when a new customer pulled in. He was an older man, clearly affluent, driving a classic, beautifully maintained Mustang. Frank had told me he was a big deal in the local business scene, a friend of Mark's. The man was fuming. "Leo, this guy came in from Mark's shop," Frank said, a frown on his face. "Says they did a full tune-up last week, and now it won't even start." My heart pounded. This was it, the direct link. I slid out from under the car, wiping my hands on a rag, and approached the Mustang. On the outside, it was perfect. Under the hood, however, it was a different story. I took one look at the sloppy wiring and the cheap, mislabeled filters, and a cold wave of certainty washed over me. This wasn't just my revenge. It was justice, and it had a face. This was where the blog met the real world. I looked at the man and said, "Sir, give me a minute. I think I know exactly what's wrong." I wasn't just fixing his car. I was gathering the final irrefutable piece of evidence, the kind of evidence that couldn't be ignored and that would bring a gleaming empire built on lies crashing down. The Mustang's owner, a man named Mr. Henderson, watched me with a skeptical eye as I worked. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I methodically checked every component Mark's shop had supposedly tuned up. My fingers moved with the muscle memory series of high-resolution photos. The cheap filter, the incorrect spark plugs, the sloppy wiring. I even took a short video clip of the loose wire connection. When I was done, I stood up and faced him. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady. "This car was not serviced properly. They used the wrong parts and cut corners. This miswired coil could have caused your engine to seize up." His face went from annoyance to disbelief, then to simmering anger. "Are you telling me Mark's shop is running a scam?" I shrugged, a small, controlled gesture. "I'm just a mechanic. I'm telling you what I found. I can fix it for you, with the right parts, the way it should have been done in the first place." As I worked, I felt a new sense of purpose. I was no longer just the victim of a betrayal. I was the one with the knowledge, the one with the truth. When the Mustang was finally fixed, its engine purring with a deep, happy hum, Mr. Henderson looked at me with new respect. "Thank you, son," he said, pulling out his wallet. "I've heard good things about Frank's garage, but I've never had this kind of a diagnosis before. How did you know?" "I just know," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. "I see this kind of thing all the time. But I'd be careful who you trust from now on." That night I went back to my blog. I didn't mention Mr. Henderson by name or Mark's shop, but I wrote a detailed post titled "The Hidden Dangers of a Perfect Tune-Up." I used the photos and video clips I had taken, blurring out any identifying marks on the parts. The post was a masterclass in exposing incompetence. It was a how-to guide for a customer to spot a fraudulent mechanic. I explained what a correct ignition coil should look like, how a proper wire should be secured, and what a genuine air filter felt like. The comment section exploded. My blog had a small but dedicated following, and they were outraged. The post was shared and reshared across local forums and social media groups. The whispers about Mark's shop that had started to circulate were now a deafening roar. People were angry. The momentum was building, but I needed to land the final undeniable blow. That opportunity arrived on a cold Friday afternoon. A man pulled up to Frank's garage in a sleek black Porsche. He was impeccably dressed, but his face was a mask of furious frustration. He didn't speak to me, but to Frank directly, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Frank, I need you to look at this," he said, handing over a work order. "My name is Thomas Vance. I'm a client of Mark's. He just finished what he called a full engine overhaul on this car, said it was essential, cost me a fortune." Frank's eyes widened. Thomas Vance was a well-known venture capitalist, a titan in the city's financial world. He was the kind of client Mark had no doubt been bragging about to everyone. This wasn't just another customer, this was a public figure, a man whose word held weight. Frank, sensing the gravity of the situation, looked at me. "Leo, take a look at this. Mr. Vance wants a second opinion." My heart pounded. This was the final piece of the puzzle. I walked over to the Porsche, my hands trembling slightly with adrenaline. On the outside, the car was a picture of perfection, but I knew what was waiting for me under the hood. I opened the engine bay and a sickening sight greeted me. Mark's mechanics hadn't done an overhaul. They had put a new gleaming engine cover on top of a mess of a job. Wires were haphazardly taped together with cheap electrical tape. Hoses were loose. The oil filter was the same flimsy brand I had seen 100 times. The fuel lines, the most critical part of the job, looked like they had been barely touched. It was a cosmetic fix, a lie painted over a dangerous problem. The whole thing was a ticking time bomb. I didn't just take pictures this time. I took my phone and started a video recording. I narrated every single mistake, every shortcut, my voice calm and professional. I showed the loose wires, the wrong kind of screws, the dirty spark plugs they had clearly never changed. Then, I pointed out the biggest lie of all, the original engine serial number, which was still visible, proving no overhaul had been done at all. Mark had simply painted the engine a new color to make it look clean, wrote a concise, professional summary of my findings, and signed it. Not as the honest wrench, but with my full name. Leo Miller, Master Mechanic. The next morning, the local news broke the story. Prominent businessman accuses elite auto shop of fraud. The article included Thomas Vance's direct quote, his public condemnation of Mark's fraudulent practices. Mark's elite auto, once the talk of the town, was now the center of a scandal. The whispers were no longer just on the internet. They were on every TV screen, on every radio, and on the front page of every newspaper. The dominoes had started to fall, and I had just given the first one a gentle push. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The news story about Thomas Vance was a match to a powder keg. Mark's spotless reputation, the one he had so carefully constructed, shattered into a million pieces. The local community, which had initially been seduced by his flashy marketing, now felt a collective sense of betrayal. The same people who had been singing his praises were now flooding social media with their own horror stories about his shop. The whisper campaign I had started with The Honest Wrench was no longer a whisper. It was a furious mob. The local news stations, scenting a bigger story, descended on Mark's elite auto. They showed up with cameras, asking pointed questions about the allegations of fraud and the quality of his work. Mark, cornered and flustered, gave a series of contradictory and panicked interviews. He tried to blame it on a rogue employee and claimed it was a misunderstanding, but the photographic and video evidence I had provided to Thomas Vance was now public record. He couldn't deny it. The lawsuits started rolling in. The city's Better Business Bureau launched a full investigation. One day, a news crew even showed up at Frank's garage, trying to interview me. Frank, loyal to a fault, told them I was just a private citizen who had simply done good work. I stayed in the back, a ghost in my own story, watching Mark's empire crumble from the safety of my new life. I was no longer just weariness. He had no idea what he was talking about. He thought this was all about a blog, a news story. He didn't understand that he had already destroyed himself the moment he decided that my trust, my friendship, and my life's work were just commodities to be used. I didn't ruin you, Mark, I said, my voice quiet. You did that yourself. The moment you decided to put profit over people, you sealed your own fate. I'm just a mechanic. I just pointed out the loose wires. You're the one who built a car that was going to crash. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He had nothing left to say. He was a man without an audience, a liar without a lie to tell. He turned and walked away, a broken man shuffling into the cold afternoon, leaving behind the wreckage of a life built on sand. I watched him go, feeling no triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The revenge wasn't loud. It was the silent and total collapse of his world. And I had simply been the one to hold up the mirror. I was under a car, lost in the rhythmic comfort of tightening a bolt when Frank called me over. "Someone to see you, Leo," he said, his voice low. I slid out from under the car and stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. Sarah was standing just inside the garage, a small, fragile figure in the harsh light. She wasn't wearing the clothes she used to, the ones bought during her shopping trips with Lisa. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her face was thin, pale. She looked like a ghost of the woman I had known. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice a small, broken whisper. I nodded, gesturing to a small, greasy bench in the corner. We sat down, the smell of oil and old tires filling the silence between us. She fiddled with the strap of her purse, unable to meet my eyes. I lost everything, Leo," she began, her voice trembling. "The house, the bank took it. Mark and Lisa, they just disappeared. I haven't heard from them since the news broke. I'm staying with my sister now. It took everything I had. My savings, my dream, my trust. You and Mark used my life as a stepping stone. You wanted an easy life, and you took the hardest possible road to get it. You were willing to step on me to get there." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She flinched, but I wasn't finished. "I don't hate you, Sarah," I said, and I meant it. "Hate is an emotion, and I don't feel anything for you anymore. The person who loved you, who would have done anything for you, he's gone. You made sure of that. The man sitting here is just a mechanic. He fixes broken things. But some things can't be fixed. We're one of them." She stared at me, her face crumpling with a fresh wave of grief. It was the first time I had seen genuine pain in her eyes, pain that wasn't about losing a house or a lifestyle, but about the total, irrevocable loss of the person I had been. She knew, in that moment, that there was no going back. The bridges had been burned, and I was on the other side, watching the smoke rise. She got up and walked out of the garage, the bell on the door chiming as she left. I stood there for a long time, the familiar smells of oil and metal grounding me. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't about a sign or a billboard. It was this quiet, final moment. A life built on lies had come crashing down, and I had simply been the one to walk away from the wreckage, the sound of a broken heart echoing in the silence. Snakes. The final act of my revenge wasn't a triumphant victory lap. It was a quiet morning in my new life. Mark's shop, now a ghost of its former self, stood empty on Elm Street, a monument to greed and failure. The Mark's Elite Auto sign was gone, replaced by a For Lease banner that flapped forlornly in the wind. The place was a ruin, an empty shell where a dream had died. Meanwhile, Frank and I had found a new, bigger location for our garage. It wasn't on a main road, and there were no fancy billboards, but it didn't matter. We didn't need them. Our reputation, built on, left me with all the debt. I don't know what to do. I watched her, feeling nothing. She had come to me, the man her husband had tried to destroy, for answers he couldn't give her. She was a casualty of a war she had willingly participated in. I didn't offer her comfort or advice. I just listened, a quiet observer of a life that had finally met its logical conclusion. She was a woman who had bet everything on a lie, and she had lost. She left, and I went back to work. I had no grand speech, no final act of triumph. The revenge was in the living. It was in the feel of the wrench in my hand, the clean smell of new oil, the honest satisfaction of a job well done. It was in the quiet dignity of building something real, brick by brick, from the ground up. The betrayal had stripped me of my innocence, but it had also given me a new kind of freedom. I no longer trusted easily, but I also no longer needed to. My purpose was clear, my life was my own, and the only person I was responsible to was myself. The old Leo was gone. He had been too naive, too trusting. The man who had taken his place was a little harder, a little more scarred, but he was also stronger, and he knew exactly who he was. My story wasn't a cautionary tale about the dangers of revenge, but a testament to the power of one man rebuilding his life from the rubble, not for anyone else's approval, but for his own.